the wonderful members of the management, our wonderful teachers, and my precious students. I'm pleased to welcome you all today to this year's Christmas performance, which, by nothing short of divine intervention, we are able to put together for you today. We have two segments in today's show. The first is an instrumental music ensemble of popular Christmas carols played by the students of the Western Music Hobby Club, directed by Mr. Sam Soney. Following that is a presentation of a heartwarming story that took place 107 years ago. But more on that later. For now, let's put our hands together for the musicians of Saint Kabir. Thank you, students, for that melodic start to the program. We now move on to the next part of today's show. So today, our grade 9 students will be presenting a reader's theatre version of The Christmas Truce, which is adapted from the book by Aaron Shepard, who is an award-winning author and a storyteller. Now, if you're wondering what reader's theatre is, well, it's a dramatic presentation of a written work in a script form. Readers read from a script and parts are divided among them. Reader's theatre is a style of theatre in which there is no need for extravagant costumes, props, scenery, or special lighting, although we have a little bit of everything today. Readers use only vocal expression to help the audience understand the story. And reader's theatre is also known as theatre of the mind, interpreter's theatre, and story theatre. And now about the story. The Christmas Truce of 1914 is one of the most extraordinary events of World War I and all of military history. I can see our principal already rubbing his hands in glee. It was a series of unofficial ceasefires that the British and German soldiers declared along the Western Front between December 24th and 25th, 1914. The armies had been fighting for months and they had hoped that the war would end by Christmas, but that was not to be. With the battles having taken their toll on both sides, the soldiers were a miserable lot. Pope Benedict XV had ascended to the papacy just a month after the outbreak of the war, and on December 7th, he issued an appeal to the leaders of Europe that the guns may fall silent, at least upon the night the angels sang. But there was little interest from the leaders on either side. This, however, did not stop the soldiers at the front from seizing the initiative. Thousands of soldiers on either side took part in a remarkable display of kindness and brotherhood right in the middle of a bloody battlefield. What is incredible is that the truce grew out of no single initiative but sprang up spontaneously and independently. Nearly everything you will hear being described in the performance today is drawn from first-hand accounts in letters and diaries of soldiers at the time. The reading will be interspersed with carols sung by our grade 11 students, trained by Miss Ruchi and Mr. Sam Soney. And so, let's get ready for the Christmas Truce.
Christmas Day, 1940. Dear mother,
my darling Meg, my good friend Emily,
my dear sister Janet,
dearest grandmother.
It is 2 in the morning and most of our men are asleep in their dugouts.
Yet, I could not sleep myself before writing to you of the wonderful events of Christmas Eve.
In truth, what happened seems almost like a fairy tale. And if I hadn't been through it myself, I would hardly believe it.
Just imagine, while you and the family sang carols before the fire there in London, I did the same to enemy soldiers here on the battlefields of France.
Yes, carols on the battlefield. All the ones you taught me.
As I wrote before, there has been little serious fighting of late. The first battles of the war left so many dead that both sides have held back until replacements could come from home. So we have mostly stayed in our trenches and waited.
But what an awful wait it has been, knowing that any moment an artillery shell might land and explode beside us in the trench, killing or maiming several men, and in daylight not daring to lift our heads above ground for fear of a sniper's bullet.
And the rain, it has fallen almost daily. Of course, it collects right in our trenches, where we must bail it out with pots and pans. And with the rain has come mud, a good foot or more deep.
It splatters and cakes everything and constantly sucks at our boots. One new recruit got his feet stuck in it, and then his hands too when he tried to get out.
Through all this, we couldn't help feeling curious about the German soldiers across the way.
After all, they faced the same dangers we did and slogged about in the same muck.
What's more, their first trench was only 50 yards from us. Between us lay no man's land, bordered on both sides by barbed wire. Yet, they were close enough. We heard their voices sometimes.
Of course, we hated them whenever they killed our friends. But other times, we joked about them and almost felt we had something in common.
And now it seems they felt the same.
Just yesterday morning, Christmas Eve day, we had our first good freeze.
Cold as we were, we welcomed it because the mud froze solid.
Everything was tinged white with frost, while a bright sun shone over all. Perfect Christmas weather.
During the day, there was little shelling or rifle fire from either side. And as darkness fell on our Christmas Eve, the shooting stopped entirely.
Our first complete silence in months. We hoped it might promise a peaceful holiday, but we didn't count on it.
We'd been told that the Germans might attack and try to catch us off guard.
I went to the dugout to rest, and lying on my cot, I must have drifted asleep. All at once, my friend was shaking me awake, saying,
"Come and see what the Germans are doing."
I grabbed my rifle, stumbled out into the trench, and stuck my head cautiously above the sandbags.
I never hoped to see a stranger and a more lovely sight. Clusters of tiny lights were shining all along the German line, left and right, as far as the eye could see.
What is it? I asked in bewilderment.
And someone answered, "Christmas trees."
And so it was. The Germans had placed Christmas trees in front of their trenches, lit by candle or lantern, like beacons of goodwill.
And then we heard their voices raised in song. Stille Nacht, heilige Nacht, alles schlaft einsam hoch.
This carol very familiar to us in Britain, but one soldier knew it and translated.
When the song finished, the men in our trenches applauded. Yes, British soldiers applauding Germans.
Then one of our own men started singing, and we all joined in.
Sounded not nearly as good as the Germans with their fine harmonies, but they responded with enthusiastic applause of their own, and then began another.
amazing.
But what came next was even more incredible. We heard one of them shout,
English, come over. You know shoot, we know shoot.
There, in the trenches, we looked at each other in bewilderment. Then one of us shouted jokingly, "You come over here."
To our astonishment, we saw two figures rise from the trench, climb over their barbed wire, and advance unprotected across no man's land. One of them called,
Send officer to top.
I saw one of our men lift his rifle to the ready, and no doubt others did the same. But our captain called out, "Hold your fire!" Then he climbed out and went to meet the Germans halfway.
We heard them talking, and a few minutes later, the captain came back with a German cigar in his mouth.
"We have agreed. There will be no shooting before midnight tomorrow. But sentries are to remain on duty. And the rest of you, stay alert."
Across the way, we could make out groups of 2 or 3 men starting out of trenches and coming towards us.
Then some of us were climbing out too. And in minutes more, there we were, in no man's land. Over 100 soldiers and officers of each side, shaking hands with men we'd been trying to kill just hours earlier.
Before long, a bonfire was built, and around it we mingled. British khaki in German grey. I must say, the Germans were the better dressed, with fresh uniforms for the holiday.
Only a couple of our men knew German, but more of the Germans knew English. I asked one of them why that was.
Because many have worked in England. Before all this, I was a waiter at the Hotel Cecil. Perhaps I waited at your table.
Perhaps you did.
One German told me he had a girlfriend in London and that the war had interrupted a plan for marriage. I said, "Don't worry, we'll have you beat by Easter. Then you can come back and marry the girl."
Will you send her a postcard? I'll give to you later.
"I will, my friend." Another German had been a porter at Victoria Station. He showed me a picture of his family back in Europe. His eldest sister was so lovely. I told him I should like to meet her someday. He beamed and said he would like that very much and gave me his family's address.
Even those who could not converse could still exchange gifts. Our cigarettes for their cigars, our tea for their coffee, our corned beef for their sausage.
Badges and buttons from uniforms changed owners, and one of our lads walked off with the infamous spiked helmet.
I myself traded a jackknife for a leather equipment belt, a fine souvenir to show when I get home.
Newspapers too changed hands, and the Germans howled with laughter at ours. They assured us that France was finished, and Russia nearly beaten too.
We told them that was nonsense. And one of them said,
Well, you believe your newspapers and we'll believe ours.
Clearly, they are lied to. Yet, after meeting these men, I wonder how truthful our own newspapers have been.
These are not the savage barbarians we've read so much about. They are men with homes and families, hopes and fears, principles, and yes, love of country.
In other words, men like ourselves.
"Why are we led to believe otherwise?"
As it grew late, a few more songs were traded around the fire, and then all joined in for "I'm Not Lying to You," Auld Lang Syne.
Acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind. Should old acquaintance be forgot in the days of Auld Lang Syne? For Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for the sake of Auld Lang Syne. We'll take a cup of kindness yet for the sake of Auld Lang Syne.
And even some talk of a football match.
I was just starting back to the trenches when an older German clutched my arm.
My God, why cannot we have peace and all go home?
I told him gently that we must ask your emperor.
Perhaps, my friend, but also we must ask our hearts.
And so, dear mother,
Dear wife,
Dear friend,
"Dear sister,
Dear grandmother,
tell me, has there ever been such a Christmas Eve in all history?
and what does it all mean? This impossible befriending of enemies.
for the fighting here, Of course, it means very little. Decent fellows the soldiers may be, but they follow orders, and we do the same.
Besides, we are here to stop their army and send it home, and never could we shirk that duty.
God knows, tomorrow we will be training our guns at these very men we sang with.
Still, one cannot help imagine what would happen if the spirit shown here were caught by the nations of the world.
Of course, disputes must always arise.
But what if our leaders were to offer well wishes in place of warnings?
Songs in place of slurs.
Greetings in place of grenades.
Presents in place of reprisals.
Would not all war end at once?
All nations say we want peace.
Yet, on this Christmas morning, I wonder if we want it quite enough.
Yours truly,
Yours always.
Sincerely,
With all my love.
Affectionately,
John.
Andrew.
Philip.
Tom.
Peter.
Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, próspero año y felicidad. Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, próspero año y felicidad. We wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. We wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. We wanna wish you a Merry Christmas from the bottom of our hearts. We wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. We wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. We wanna wish you a Merry Christmas from the bottom of our hearts. Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, próspero año y felicidad. Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, próspero año y felicidad. We wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. We wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. We wanna wish you a Merry Christmas from the bottom of our hearts. We wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. We wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. We wanna wish you a Merry Christmas from the bottom of our hearts.
But let us take this opportunity of Christmas that we are over here together to pray that all of us stay safe, all our family members stay safe, and next year we have Christmas joy in far more Josh in the customary way that we always do. Thank you very much. Have a great day.